has nothing to, it is the religious freedom of our country. So the battle he was fighting there that I joined him with, I think is similar to the battle that we're talking about with drones. We're talking about the Bill of Rights. Even though the drones have made it more insidious and we're more concerned because they're more pervasive and they're everywhere, it's really about the Bill of Rights. It isn't just about the technology. The technology makes it worse. I used to say, when I read 1984 when I was a kid, I was like, gosh, this is scary. I hope this would never happen to our country. But I felt somewhat relieved because when I was a kid, read 1984, that technology was unimaginable, that there would be cameras everywhere and they could see your every move, and these cameras would work both ways. We couldn't imagine it, so we felt somewhat comforted, that 1984 was something technologically impossible. But 1984 has come, and it's here now because the technology is available. So our vigilance has to be even greater. Now, is everybody getting kind of relaxed? I'm just getting warmed up. I've got 13 hours worth of material. I can do that. After the filibuster, we were kind of excited, and my staff was telling me all kinds of things like 1 million tweets and retweets. I'm not sure what that means, but it sounds like a lot of people. So I went to CPAC the next week, the Conservative Political Action Committee, and I'm giving a speech, and I get started, and I'm going to tell them I got my 13 hours of material, and some guy in the audience stands up and says, "Don't drone me, bro." And I said, "You summarized 13 hours in 3 words." That's exactly my point. The other day I was up in New York and driving past the Federal Reserve, and the streets are clogged, there's police everywhere, the sirens are going on, and we got out of the car and said, "What's going on? What happened?" They said, "The Federal Reserve has been robbed." So we went inside, and they had caught the robbers immediately. The robbers were in front of the big safe, but they were flummoxed. They were perplexed. They didn't know what to do with it. Minus $16 trillion. I stole that from Jimmy Kimmel. I'm trying to not steal too many things without getting credit. But there was another Jimmy Kimmel that my middle son Duncan sent to me recently. Kids are persuaded and get their news through short vignettes. We've got to learn that's how the news is going out. Short vignettes, particularly if they're funny. So Jimmy Kimmel's out on the street, and he's doing Man on the Street, and he says, "Ma'am, did you realize that the president has pardoned the sequester? And he sent it to Portugal. What do you think?" And the first woman was like, "Well, I really like the president, and he wouldn't send it to Portugal if it wasn't a good place for us." And this went on and on. He finally gets to one person, and then he says, "Well, North Korea has been acting so belligerent. You heard the president sent the sequester to North Korea." And that's exactly right. North Korea deserves it, and if anybody should have that sequester, it's North Korea. A little bit scary when we think these are some of the people who are voting in our election. There was a poll done right after 9/11, and they said, who committed 9/11? Was it Iraq or Iran, or who was it? Over 50% of the people thought Iraq were the people who attacked us on 9/11. That's a confusion that is a problem. We need to know more about what's going on around us. And with regard to the sequester, it is disappointing and sad that the self-guided tours have been shut down. But I want to let you know what makes me madder is the same week that the president shuts down the White House, he announces he's got $250 million he found to send to Egypt. He's got F-16s. He's sending F-16s to Egypt, M1 Abrams tanks to Egypt, and doesn't have enough money to keep the White House open. Doesn't have enough money for air traffic controllers or meat inspectors. But he's got $250 million to send to Egypt. I say, you know what? Not one penny more to these countries that are chanting death. John Kerry is watching some of this because I had him in front of our Foreign Affairs Committee the other day, and I'm asking him questions, and he says very snobbily, this is my interpretation, he says, "Well, people need to quit going around the country and stirring those people up and telling them that foreign aid's bad and getting them all riled up. Maybe a great applause line, but we don't need to be doing that." And so I raised my hand and I said, "Secretary Kerry, I'm not stirring the people up. They're already stirred." here and decided tonight that it was a mistake to send money to countries that hate us. You know that. You instinctively know that. You instinctively know that it's a bad idea to borrow money from China to build roads in Pakistan. You know that. What he doesn't understand, what many of them fail to understand, is this is where you are. I'm going to where you are because I came from where you are. I'm not making you and trying to create some perception that foreign aid's a bad deal. And so he says it's doing such great things. I raised my hand. I said, well, Mubarak was the head of Egypt. We gave him $60 billion. He and his family are worth somewhere between 10 to 20 billion that we can count. He's got homes in every continent on the world. He was a crook. Regular people in this room pay taxes to go to a rich person in another country who then made the poor people in his country mad. So do you think those poor people that were out protesting, regular people, let's call them, in Tahrir Square, who were mad at Mubarak because he stole all that money, do you think they're happy with America when they get sprayed with tear gas that was made in Pennsylvania, bought with your tax dollars? No, foreign aid isn't buying their sympathy or their friendship. They're mad more at us because we give it to people who are oppressive to them. So we have to change what we're doing. We're out of money. It's not going to balance the budget. That's the other argument. It's only 1% of the budget. Yes, it's a small amount. It's not going to balance the budget. But you've got to start somewhere.
Yep.
And the president says, woe is me. Woe is me. The sequester. We can't possibly survive the sequester. Well, I have a couple of suggestions for him before we close the White House. What about the $300,000 we spent on a robotic squirrel last year?
Yeah.
Apparently, they wanted to know, some crack scientists with your tax dollars wanted to know, will a rattlesnake strike a squirrel that's not wagging its tail? And they couldn't get a live squirrel to volunteer not to wag its tail. So they built a robotic one at $300,000, and guess what? The rattlesnake will bite the you-know-what out of a squirrel that's not wagging its tail. They spent $500,000 developing a menu for Mars. Now, this could be a good thing. If you have a college kid who's living in your basement, who might be your son or daughter, and you're looking for a job for them, it's $5,000 stipend, all expenses paid. The study was in Hawaii. This is a terrible job. There were some requirements for your young man or woman at home you're looking to get a job or government grant. You had to like food. So they sent them out there and they said, what would the menu be on Mars? And so what did a bunch of college kids come up with? Pizza. In the military budget, and this is why we have to look at the military budget also, there was $1.8 million in the military budget to develop roll-up beef jerky. There was $5 million in the military budget to study the collective action of fish. I don't know what that means. And I certainly could do it for a lot less than $5 million. We have to look at this. We can't just say every dollar spent on the military is sacred or well spent. Some have said if we would audit the Pentagon, there's $25 billion worth of savings. Tom Coburn, who's one of the best at rooting through the government and looking at waste, he came up with $7 billion that's being spent on research in the military budget that has nothing to do with the military. For goodness sake, these start adding up to real money. If you simply don't rehire people, I suggested this to the president, he went a year and a half with the sequester until he started doing anything. So all of a sudden he's laying off air traffic controllers, but the sequester was voted on a year and a half previously, he did nothing. If you simply do not rehire the people who retire at the end of their service, retire from federal government, don't rehire them, it saves like $9 billion a year. If you were to cut their travel budget, you've heard about them going to Las Vegas and spending $1 million and they have puppets and magicians and belly dancers. If you just cut their travel budget by 25%, that's $2 billion. If you said to the federal government, you have to have competitive contracts, which means, yeah, you'd have to take the cheapest price offered to do a job, which means you wouldn't do prevailing wage and you wouldn't do this Davis-Bacon stuff, that saves $9 to $10 billion. There's $25 billion worth of real estate that is not being used. It's just sitting there vacant. It actually costs money to take care of the $25 billion worth of real estate. There's one the other day, and I don't know if you saw this, Roy. This was accounts that have zero balance in them. I think there's 800 accounts with zero balance in it. And I forget what it adds up to, but it's like millions of dollars a year maintaining bank accounts with no money in them.
Oh my God.
I guarantee if you look through item after item, if you had somebody like Tom Coburn and you put them into government and say, go after the waste and start doing, I give you permission to start cutting, we could cut lots of things without cutting essential services. If you look at the sequester, there's one line going up like this. This is what your government's going to spend with the sequester. This is the other line. You can't even see any white space between the lines. It's a slowdown in the rate of growth. If we can't do this, we're doomed. We have to step up as a country. And the good news is, I think we're winning on this one. Public relations is winning. Now, there are perks to sometimes knowing important people in Washington, and the other senator in my state is the minority leader, Senator McConnell. So I got on the Foreign Affairs Committee because I am good friends with Senator McConnell, and I don't want to brag, but so I'm on the Senate committee, and we get to go through the appointment. So on the way out, guess what? Hillary Clinton stops by. So I couldn't help myself. I said, Secretary Clinton, did you read the cables asking for help, asking for more security? And she said she didn't read them. And so I said, if I had been president, I would have relieved you of your responsibility. And I would go one step further. I think that her dereliction of duty, I don't question her motives, but her dereliction of duty and her lack of leadership should preclude her from ever holding any office. Think about what happened. Think about the sequence of things. In early May, they asked for a DC-3 so they can move people around the country and leave quickly if they have to. Denied. 3 days later, Hillary Clinton's State Department approves $100,000 for an electrical charging station at the embassy in Vienna so they can green it up and show off to the Europeans how green we are, because they have all electric cars, but they had to build a brand new electrical charging station for $100,000 while not paying attention to the security needs in Benghazi. So we go through the summer. In the middle of the summer, this came from Tom Coburn also, we find out that they spent another $100,000 sending 3 Indian American comics from the United States to India to promote Americanism, to promote our culture on a make chai, not war tour. Now, I don't care if people want to go, and I'm all for comedy, but I don't think we need to be paying for it when we say we don't have enough money for security.